computer. Cool. That looks good. Um, and yeah, what I've done so far is I just like copied in these user stories into the README so that I could like just have easier access to them. And then what else did I do? Oh, I ran the tests just to see like that I had 12 failing tests and I bundled. So we're about where I would expect to be. And as I'm like looking at these tests, I can tell like, all right, it's a student spec and a professor spec, and they're both um, models tests. Or yeah, they're both models tests. So that like to me makes me want to be like, okay, let me run one of these at a time, so I can just focus on like maybe like student first, and then go from there. And let's get this thing up. Student spec. Cool. So now I'm down to 5 failures, which is a little bit more, a little bit easier to work with. Okay, cool. So I got some validations, it looks like, and then my relationships. So I will bring up student over here, and I think like what I'm gonna do. Hey y'all, that Joshua, I see you joining, and George. Um, all I said so far is I'm gonna go like make these tests pass, and you can like come off mute whenever you want, really, and like just ask me whatever you want. I'm good with you kind of like interrupting when you have questions about whatever. Okay, so I'm pretty sure like this is validates presence of, and then I think I can give like these multiple arguments. So let's try that and see if I can get this to be 2 failing tests. Cool. That worked, it looks like. Yeah, and that's just like kind of a little trick that you don't have to write this whole thing more than once. And then I'm also going to do whatever relationships. So should have many professor students, and should have many professors through professor students. Okay, so that's has many professor students, and then has many professors through professor students. And that needs to be like that. I believe that's the syntax. Let's see. Cool. So I got something going on here. Undefined method class name for nil class. Okay, that's not like the most helpful error, but has many professors through professor students. I'm probably just like writing this slightly wrong. Yeah, how does the syntax work? I'll just have to go look it up. Cool. That looks like what I have, but let's see. Where did that thing go? Okay. That looks good to me. So let's look at my test. And let's look at my error.
Is it because you need to define it within the professor students as well?
You know what? That might be it. It's probably, yeah, that's a good a good assumption, I think. Um, let's look at, I think the way that I can like really figure out this error is like, yeah, I have to like look at professor students, right? Let's just see. Cool. Yeah, so I've got the model. So let's try that. Professors, and then students. Cool. Cool. Yeah, so the error changed, and I think that's like the biggest thing to look at here is like, all right, um, belongs to professor. All right, so it doesn't even like it expected student to have a has many association called professors. Professors does not exist, so that's like an interesting one because student would have many professors. Yeah, okay. So I think like because of how I had this defined as professors here, it like tried to go through this one and then hit that plural syntax and was like, I don't know how to connect this to a table called um, to a professor's association because the professors like doesn't make sense to the association method because this needs to be singular. So let's just check and see. I think it'll be some kind of different error now too. Okay, so that made it pass. So that is what it is. So that's like a good thing to point out is like just because you define it on one model, if you're going through a join table, like the join table has to have the association method too, because otherwise it's just not sure where to look, what table to look for, or really what it is what column on its own table to look for, which is like professor ID. Yeah. Any like follow-ups there? Any follow-up things coming up for y'all? Okay, cool. And let's look at that error message that wasn't that helpful, which like undefined method class name for nil class on this, yeah, in the student spec on the has many through. Something to just like be aware of, right? Because this isn't like a super helpful error, but if we can like think about it and be like, all right, this means I did like not all of my association helpers are set up where specifically on my through table is what that like is saying to me. On my through table, it doesn't know how to like connect it. Cool. All right, let's run the professor's test. Yeah, go ahead.
So for that error, is there like some capybara under the hood stuff happening that's like class methods? It's like calling class methods on professor students
No,
because that doesn't exist, then it's returning nil.
yeah, that's like it's not capybara, so I want to like make sure that like we're kind of not thinking about it in capybara, like because we're using the shoulda matchers with, or I should say, because we're using the shoulda matchers like with the model names, and or really what it is it's the table names. Because we're doing it that way, it's basically like looking for associations under the hood that are, or looking for associations that are set up that then under the hood go and validate that the columns are in the correct places on the tables. So it's saying like, okay, like if you're saying that I should be able to get access to professors from my student table through this professor students, then like I better see a professor ID over on this professor students table, and I better see a student ID over there. And at some point under the hood, when you don't have the association set up, it's like I don't see this, or I looked in the wrong place, and I wasn't able to find it because that there wasn't an ID column set up where I expected it.
Right, thanks.
Yep, for sure. All right, cool. Let's get through. Which one am I running now? Think. Yes, professors. All right, professor spec. Cool. Should validate presence of name, age. All right, let's just pull this thing up. And now that I made my belongs to, that's like it's like a 2-for-1. Like I did it to, make sure that my student was passing, but now I can be pretty sure that my professor-student relationship will be set up correctly. All right, let's go to professor. All right, so validates presence of, and then we'll give it a name, age, specialty, and then this is going to be the same thing, has many professor students, and then has many students through professor students. All right, cool. I think that should get us good on the relationships. Okay, so that worked just fine. Before we move on, and I'll run my other spec too. What is it? Professor students. Just to make sure this passed. But before we moved on, like anything that came up for you, anything that y'all did that was different than me, or things you want to talk about with like these relationships before we move on?
So I understand like the validates and like the has many and all this. It's not the like I guess what's creating the table between the two? Is it like when we run like the database functions,
Yeah,
and then this is just like a whole validation process,
it's
or
it's twofold. But like you're on the right track. Like this is how we validate that everything is set up correctly via testing. Is like with these shoulda matchers, and it gives us like the nice syntax to like validate that a column must be there, or um, validate that this relationship is set up. But where we actually do that setting up with the correct foreign keys is going
right?
to be like, all right, like I created my professors, I created my students, then I created my professor students, and this references is kind of like the key here in this table, like, hey, this is a foreign key and this is the table that it's referencing for both of them. And then after that point, it's like, yeah, great, you have the database set up in a way where these things are connected, but you still have to tell Rails how to
Okay,
associate these tables and give you the special like method syntax that you get from your helpers,
yeah,
like students. So now anytime I want a professor, I get to call professor students, and I can get all of that professors, associated professor students. Same thing with students now. Like I get those helpers, and I've told Rails, because we got to think like active record is like this layer that's on top of our database, and then there's like us writing the code. And so migrations is database level connection, and then using the helpers tells active record like, hey, this is how we like fit it all
got it,
together.
got it.
Yep, cool. All right, so I need to write a test, and I'm gonna grab it from the readme. Yeah, let's just get all this, and this will be a feature test. So it's in spec. Something to note here. So if I make my features folder, then RSpec by default knows that that feature tests are going to live in here, and Capybara is included by default. If I don't make this features folder and I just start writing the test like outside of a features folder, then I have to do this like special syntax here where I'm doing like rspec.describe, and then I would say type feature. All right, so like that is the big difference. Like you can do it either way. I like just creating a folder for features because it's like more organized now, and yeah, and like that like works better for me. All right, I don't even know what I'm doing here. What am I doing? Visit the professor's show. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll make this one more sub level called professors, and then I will start writing in there. We just have to have like, it can be as nested as you need it to be, but we just need it to be like spec features as like the combination, and then any level of nesting after that is okay. And I'll probably call this the show spec. See a list of the names of the students the professors have. Yeah, okay, cool. So that sounds good. So show spec.rb, And then now I can just like start typing describe, which is kind of nice. Now I don't have to do the special like RSpecs and like this is like the special models syntax. And then if I wanted this, like I could do this for features too. Okay, so let's now paste in our user story. Okay, don't really want it to look like that actually. So I don't need that. So I'll say this is going to be in my describe. And we'll put them on the same line. Get these out of here. So I'm just full screen right now. All right, cool. And then I'm going to say, yeah, this is going to be my it block. And then, yeah, I'll just use these kind of as I go. Okay, so what am I going to need here? I need an end, and then I need to get rid of that. And then let's just get these out of here. Okay, what did I forget? I do. All right, cool. One thing to note here, like it can be super confusing and hard to track down bugs if we're not indenting properly. So just indent properly, you'll thank yourself later when you can easily track things down. Cool, so I know I'm gonna need a professor, right? And I don't totally remember what's in here. So what I would do here is I would go to the schema just to like view the schema right alongside, like when I'm making the test, like, okay, like let's just make sure I get everything that I need here. Actually, are there seed files in this? I can't remember. If there's seeds, I'll probably just use those. Oh, look at that. That's great. Yeah, so let's just use all of these. Shit, I think I'm gonna need them all. So, did y'all do this or notice this, or did you go create them?
Yeah, I use the seeds.
I didn't even notice them. I've really hardly used the seeds folder. When we did it in class, mine didn't go over correctly for some reason, so I
Yeah.
haven't like had the experience with that. But I did something a little differently. Like, maybe this is overcomplicating things, but I made, and I got like this is the part that I got stuck on, like for the longest, is I made like a professor students controller, and then
Yep.
like had this instead of a show page as like an index, and then like I guess I'll see in a minute, but what's kind of different was like I tried using that professor student dot create kind of syntax, and it said there was an undefined constant for professor student. But like looking at stuff online, I could do like the variable that holds a professor students dot create in parentheses student. And so I guess it's like creating those relationship connections is kind of what I'm struggling with the most, at least
Totally.
right now.
Yeah, and so that's like a good thing to point out. And here's what I'll say is like so these seeds are here because like it's so basically they're there for you to save time. But really what we need to do here is like really understand what's happening here. We have to create a professor and a student first, and then to create the connection, this is like the most explicit way to do it, where you're like, hey, this student ID goes with this object, right? And then this professor ID goes with this object, and I'm like explicitly like showing that each time I create one of these. So this like each one of these is basically, okay, now these two are connected, now these two are connected. The other way that you can do it is I could be like, once I have Harry, then I can say dot professors dot create, and this is like some shorthand syntax. And now what this will do is it will go and like, so let's say I would need all of the professor syntax here. And then so basically what this does is it goes and creates a professor, and then based on whatever that ID is, and this like you using this like helper syntax here, it automatically goes and like creates the row in the professor student table. So this is like the shorthand way to do it, whereas this would be like the more explicit, like very clear, like, okay, like this is what this should look like. And I know that because I am explicitly like hitting this model and like hitting the table and assigning these IDs how I want. This is the other, like, it's kind of, I think that this is like a little bit shorter syntax, but it can be easy to just like gloss right over this part, and you get this part from the has many relationship. So you get access to this syntax because you have this set up on your model.
And then I guess follow up. So these do the same thing, the
Mhm.
Harry.professors, and then like what's beneath it. But for the professor student create, is it just pulling in the student and professor IDs, whereas the one above it is pulling in the teacher's name and age and potions, or the and specialty to add to that table?
So no. So the name, the age, and the specialty are okay. So yes and no is what I should say. The name, the age, and the specialty are being created as a new professor object at the exact same, or like right before the professor student is being created. So if I was going to write out like what was happening here under the hood, it would be like, okay, you know, hit the professor table and create a new object, or a new row, I should say. Then what happens is us like hit the professor student table and create a new row with Harry ID and whatever this ID becomes, which I can't really see here. I don't know what that ID is going to be, but whatever this new professor and the current professor ID, which is like which was just created right here, right? So whatever I assign that ID to, it also gets assigned to the professor student professor ID. Like, and now this is like basically a two-step thing that I'm doing with one line, whereas here I'm doing both steps, right? Like if I did it this way, it's like, okay, Harry's getting created, and then I already have a professor up here, and I'm assigning it like down here.
So then for the code on line 11, I wouldn't necessarily have to have the teachers created already, like in lines 3 through 5.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
this is basically the substitute for doing this. Like if I do this now, I'll still have the exact amount. Let me just make this one more. I would still have basically the exact same thing that I would have before, because I'm just like creating this Snape on the fly. And then the other thing that I would want to do here is comment this one out, because like basically like we are doing both this. We are basically doing line 15 and line 3 in one full swoop here.
Gotcha. Okay, so like this is all happening like within the test, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when are these professor student objects being created outside the test?
Yeah, so that's like a good question. You can do it two places, right? You can do it in the functionality of your application if you've given it this functionality where like there's a create button with a route that's like doing this in the controller basically. So you would basically do this in the controller if you needed to associate those things and have like a way to do it in the application. The other place that you can do it is all of this stuff is going to work in Rails console. So like once I drop into here, like all of this, I can always like play with my data here and like just drop it in and like see this. This is just happening with the development database, whereas in my test, it's happening in my test database. But like all of this stuff can happen in my console, and then my application just like has that data loaded up.
And that's because all this is in this seed file.
Not necessarily. Like I didn't seed this. I don't think I seeded the database. Let's see. Oh yeah, I did. No, I did, because I ran a RakeDB setup. So here's the thing. Now there's going to be some duplicates in here if we look, like whoever these two people I dropped in, Remus should be in there twice, and so should Rubus. Yeah, so we've got Rubus as ID 2, and then I think, yeah, Rubus also has ID 4 now. So I have like a couple of duplicates. Because when I first ran this, what I ran was, let me exit and do a history. I did a RakeDB setup. What a setup does is it does three in one. It creates the database. It migrates the database with any of the, so it hits all the migration files, migrates the database, and then it seeds the database. So it does all three of those things in that call. But that's just for like that's just for my like development and my test environment. It like hit it and like did all of that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, I know it's a lot for y'all because like there's so many moving parts that you have to figure out how they're connecting, right? And like,
Yeah.
I totally get that that's like probably a big step. And yeah, it's week 2 and we're gonna get through it.
Well,
All right,
thanks.
so I'm gonna, yeah, of course. I'm gonna write this test. I'm gonna comment this out so I still have it if y'all wanna reference it later. But I'm gonna keep what was in my seed file. And that's actually one thing that I'd have to go look up. I'm not sure if it seeds the test database, so I could actually go check that out. Rails C. How do you do it? I think you do like test here. Yeah, okay. So that's Rails C by default drops into your development like console. If I want to give it if I want to go somewhere else, then I can get into a different environment and you can see, okay, it loaded up my test environment now. Now if I do a professor.all, it might look different. Yeah, so now I don't have anything. So something to note about seeds, it's only seeding my development database. My test database was created, it was migrated to look the same, but for seeding, the seeds by default, only seeding development. Test, completely clean at this point, and my test database will, that's why I had to copy and paste the seed stuff into this it block, because with every it block it's basically loading up the data and then clearing the data by default to just make things faster so that shit isn't like hanging around after the test runs. Okay, I'm gonna try and write this test. All right, so when I visit professor's ID, all right, so that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm going to visit the professors / let's go to, who do we have? At snape.id probably. Then I see the list of the names of the students the professors have, okay? So that means that all of these that are associated with Snape, and I can highlight them. All right, so just these 2, and I might just like I might just move this up so that these are like clearly, all right, and it's Harry and Longbottom is who I should see. So now I'm just gonna say expect page to have content, and then it would be like Harry.name. Oh yeah, and this is not an instance variable, that's a local variable. And then who else is this Longbottom.name? Yeah, so this feels good to me because it's like, yeah, I'm doing, I think I've covered everything that this user story is asking me to do. It's like, go to this specific professor. And that's why I reached for a show first. And that maybe wasn't that clear to you yet, Zach. But I saw via the path that I'm like, okay, this to me looks like it's going to be a show spec, because what I'm doing realistically is I'm going to a specific professor, and I figured that out immediately based on the path and just knowing what like the RESTful routes paths are. And I was like, all right. And then, oh, via this relationship that I have set up here, like I get, you know, I get students through professors. So now on my show page, what I'm thinking I'm going to do is go like do like a professor.students.each and show all the names. All right, so I'm going to run this. Get out of here. Make this over here so y'all can see. RSpec, spec features. All right, and I only should have one features test here. So that's where I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna run that. Great. And I screwed up already, right? I'm sure you all will see this at some point where it's like, hey, I don't have access to this model, and you'd probably be like, well, that's dumb because I see that I've created it. But one thing I always forget, and you got to remember to do, is require Rails helper. Rails helper like loads up your entire environment so that like your test knows about like all the stuff that you've created. Cool. No route. All right. Now I'm like into this like TDD like area where I'm like feeling pretty good. Okay, I kind of know what to expect now. So I'll probably go over to routes and hand roll this. This is going to be a get. It's going to be to professors and then dynamic ID, and that will route to, what will it route to? My professors show, I believe, is what I'm going to want. And I think I defined that all right. Let's see. Cool. Uninitialized constant professors controller. And that's kind of nice because like it's already looking for something that I haven't even created. And it's just like telling me the name of like what I need to create. So I'm going to copy that. Then I'm going to go up into my app controllers, and this will be here. I'm going to say professors controller .rb. Cool. And now I will, yeah, copied that. So let's make this inherit from application controller and then end. And then I'm not going to skip a step just so you can see what the error is. Now I expect there to be no action, right? Yeah, okay, cool. So it looked for my show because that's where I told it to look in my routes, right? Like if we go to my right, it's like I told it to like look for this professor's controller and then specifically go look in show. So that's what I'm going to define now. Now, if I define this, I expect a undefined template error, missing template, I should say, because it's going to look for show.html.erb in the specific like views folder that is connected to professors, and that's what I get, right? Don't have a template for this, not sure how to handle this request. So now I'm going to be like, all right, cool. I know where it's going to look over here in my app. It's going to look, because this is all Rails convention stuff, it's going to look by default into views. I don't have anything in here. So it's going to say views. Then it's going to look for the controller name, professors. So I'm going to create that. And then it's going to be show.html.erb. Yeah, and then now at this point, I think I've got the MVC pieces hooked up. And now what I expect is a failure that's like, hey, this page didn't have any content on it. Like, sorry, I was just looking for, Harry Potter here, but you didn't put anything in your view, so I didn't find anything there. And so it's good. Like you see how I can like predict these errors. Now, granted, I've been doing this much longer than y'all, but like it's a great pattern to get in because you can tell like what you need to do next and what step is next. And if you don't get the error that you predicted, then you probably did something like syntax wise that's like slightly off. Cool. All right, so this is going to be my view. I'm probably just going to give it like a header. You don't have to do this, but it's like professor. And then I probably want to say whoever my professor is at professor.name. And then what I want to do here is I'm going to want to iterate over my professor.students, and I get .students one more time via this has many. Because I defined it this way, I can get onto students this way that a professor is associated with. Each do student, and then what else? Oh, this, I don't want to show this. This is Ruby that I don't want to show. Let's give it the end. And then here is the stuff I do want to show, and that's going to be a student.name. And then I'll probably just wrap this in like an H3 or something so that I have it. Cool. All right, cool. One thing to note about like Atom, in the show pages, like when you use dynamic Ruby, like and you like do it slightly weird where Atom can't like interpret it anymore, it'll like, it's not very helpful with like the coloring. Sometimes what you can do is I can just close this and like reopen it so that it loads up again like all the right way. Now, look at that. Like now it's colored and like it looks better. I can easily tell if I've made a mistake somewhere, right? And I get that like nice, helpful, like Ruby coloring. So that's nice. Cool. So now I'm gonna run this, and I know I'm gonna get an error because I forgot one thing, but I still wanna run it. Cool. Undefined method name for nil class, y'all should be pretty familiar with like this type of error from mod 1, but it's basically just saying like, hey, you tried to call a method on something that doesn't exist. Like your instance variable doesn't exist here, and the reason is because I never like passed it from the view. And what I want to do is I want to define it here, and I want to actually, let's go into pry because this is better to look at in pry. I want to show you all why you get this. So if I'm here, I've hit this show action. What I like to look at is params, and let's make this full screen so you can see. So I'm looking at the params. The only param that actually like is useful is this ID, and I get this ID param. There's a couple of ways we pass params in Rails, but one of the ways is via the way that we define our routes, right? So if I go to my routes and I look here, the reason that this ID comes in over here is because I have defined my route in a way where this ID parameter is dynamic, and I expect it to be passed in from the path, and that is indeed what happens. And then I also get it in params because of this, because I have passed it this way. So just wanted to be super clear on that. And then what I would do from here is a professor.find params ID. And it's confusing at first, like you can access params ID even though it looks like a string here. Like you can use a symbol to get it, or this could be a string too. Like this isn't wrong either. And like you can get it either way, but like generally we'll use the symbol because symbols are like slightly faster. All right, cool. So I'm gonna get this and put it in my controller, and then I think I should get a passing test. Professors. Wow, I can't type. Professors. Controller. All right. Cool. Cool. Now I think everything's hooked up, right? I've got the show, I've got the instance variable. I pass that over here, and then, oop, this is gonna be wrong. I can already tell. It's not dot student, right? It's dot students. And let's see what that error is, because I know y'all will make it at some point. Cool. Undefined method student for professor. It's not student, it's students, because that's the way that I defined it in my model when I did the has many through. Cool. What did I spell wrong? Undefined local variable or method student. Where is that coming from? Oh, I just did. Yeah. I don't know how to spell. Cool. And now, finally, I think we'll get a passing test. Great. All right. What do y'all think about that? Y'all feeling all right? You got anything coming up?
That's looking good to me. Like I pretty much understand from this point forward, so I might jump to another review if that's okay with you, Tim.
Totally fine with me.
One thing before I go, I've noticed in our project that there's been a couple times where like I can't just simply call like, whatever params brackets ID. Like I have to like when I pry into it and play around with it a little bit, I realize that I have to do like, at user.id or like user ID.id or like some variation of it. Can you speak to like when I can expect those differences?
Yeah, totally. The first place to look is how you defined your routes. So if this was going to be, if I define this as professor ID, which like will certainly work, now the error that I'm going to get is probably one that you're familiar with at this point, which is going to be like, couldn't find professor without an ID.
Yeah.
Right. And
cool.
and so the reason is because now I've redefined what is in params, and I can see that here. If I look in here and hit this pry now, it's not called ID anymore. Now when I look at params, let's make it full screen. is professor ID because of the way I define my route. So like that's the big difference. It's like however you define the route is how you should expect it in that controller action.
Awesome. Cool. That's good to see. I was a little confused a moment ago when you mentioned that like that the route kind of defines the param. So that makes more sense because I've definitely seen that error like 100 times now, and I'm like, why is this happening? So
Totally.
thank you. That helps a lot.
The thing I want to make sure you do when you see that error, pry into the top of the action and check params first, and that will be like however you're trying to call an ID, it's probably defined a different way or passed in a different way.
Cool. Right on. Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for your rundown.
Yep, definitely. All right, Kevin, it's just us, so I'm like down to run through this story. I think that's probably the best way, but if you have like other stuff you want to talk about, then we can do that too.
Okay, we're moving on to the next story.
Yeah, looks like, all right, so when I visit students, see a list of students and the number of professors each student has. Cool. Draco Malfoy. All right, I'll have to like look. I'm not like too familiar with Harry Potter terms, so I'm not like knowing if they're a professor or student right off the bat, but I'll figure it out. Yeah. Okay, cool. So what I want to do here is, because now this is a student's route, I'm going to go into the students feature, and because I know I'm going to nest this under students, so I'll do that first. And then I also can tell just by the path, because of how I know about what I know about RESTful routes, that like students here is going to be one of my RESTful routes, likely going to route to an index, and it's going to be a get, and it's going to be a get for all the students, right? I'm trying to like remember the exact term, and I can't. It's like escaping me right now, but I know that that's like, I can tell just from the URI that like this is going to be a read some data, and it's going to be a grab all the students and then display some of their associated data. Cool. So I'll call this index spec.rb, and I'll probably grab some of the stuff from the show. I'll probably grab like all of this. And one thing to note is like, it's fine if you create this stuff for the challenge and then don't go back and clean it up. But like basically, since I'm only using Harry and Longbottom here, I don't actually need any of this, because I'm scoping it to Snape, right? And so I could go like in at least my project, I don't want to be creating like data that I don't need. So I could do this, and then I could get rid of these two, I believe. And then I could, the yellows kind of show me what's not used anymore. And then if I ran this, then this should be the exact same. I should be getting a passing test still. Yeah, cool. All right, so yeah, let's grab all of this. Actually, now I want to like Command Z, because I want some more of this data for this one. But I just wanted to show you that. So let's grab this and let's put it in my index spec, and then I'll kind of go make it work for this one. All right, 3 of 4. So as a visitor, when I visit students, then I'll just copy and paste this line in. I see. Cool. And yeah, now I've got all my objects. The big difference is now I gotta like actually like make this visit the right place. So this is gonna go to students. And then if I look back at my user story, get that back in here, it's gonna be, okay, so I say this, it looks like I'm doing a student name. Yeah, because these are students. And then it says student name, whatever the name is, and then that points to how many professors they're associated with. So I got to do like some quick math here. This is going to be like that. And then I want the page to have content. Yeah, it's going to need all of these names. So I can actually like leave all of this, and I'll just add one. It's going to be Malfoy is going to be there too, because I've got 3 students. And then this is going to point at how many professors. So it's going to be this, and then yeah, I probably have to like actually string interpolate here, because otherwise I won't be able to like get exactly what it should look like from that example, which was like, all right, it's Harry.name, and then looks like a colon, and then I want this to be like, I'm thinking of a method, I'm like dream driving here, like Harry.num professors that I'm going to do. And so now I'll just I'll probably just copy and paste this into my next view and change the names. Cool, do that, and so this is going to be Longbottom, and this is going to be Malfoy. Such weird names. All right, cool. So that looks right to me, and let me just make sure by one more time getting this user story in and making sure that it looks the way that it expects. Yeah, okay, so it looks like my example now, I think, which is great. And now I feel good about running this test. You feel good about running it?
Yep.
Cool. All right, let's do it. Let's get this over here. Now it's going to be RSpec, spec, features, what is students? Yeah. Cool, that's what I expected. Couldn't get to my route, which is always good too, to just like note like, okay, all of this data got created just fine if we hit 24 and was where we're getting our error. So let's go to the routes and create this is going to be a get to students, and then that's going to go to students and index. Cool, I can run that now, and just, I'm thinking it's going to look for a student's controller. Cool, that's good, that's what I was hoping for. Let's go into controllers. Okay, so students controller.rb, and then class students controller inherits from application controller end. And just for time, I'm going to create this index action probably here, and then I'll also create my my view for students. And I think this will get me to like, doesn't have any content on the page basically. Index.html.erb. Great. So now I think I should get like, can't find, you know, Harry colon whatever. Okay, yeah, and so this, I actually get something different, right? I get this num professors error here. And this is probably not something you like reach for right off the bat, but the reason I put this here is because I thought in my head, like, hey, this is going to be a model method that counts the number of professors for each student. So that made me think, okay, it's going to be an instance method. It's going to be on the student class. And like, that's where I'm going to create that, because it's some data. It's like a data action, count the number of professors associated. So I'm thinking like in my head, like, okay, that's data modeling that goes on the model level. And so that's why I kind of like dream drove it like this. What I'll show you is like, I'll show you how I would do it, and then I'll like show you how you probably went about it, and then tell you kind of like why I chose what I did. So if I go now to student, right, I'm just gonna follow this error message. It's basically like undefined method, num professors. All right, cool. So let's just define it. Num professors. That should get me by this error. Cool. Couldn't find, you know, Harry Potter colon whatever, and then what it would expect to be is like this being called in the view. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to go probably like, I have some options here. I don't have a test for this one, so I think like at this point I'm going to leave this one be right here, and I'm going to go to the view and probably like try and get this view to work. Let's go to the controller too, so I can make sure that I'm passing everything in. Students controller. Cool. All right, so I don't have anything here, so I know I'm going to need students. And so this is a different thing, right? I'm not using any params in index, but I still have access to the model, and so I can still grab data from the model. If I need it all, which is kind of what the pattern is for the index, then I can just grab it all. And so now I'll say, this is going to be a student index, so all students is probably something that I'd say on this one. And then now I can do some Ruby, and this will be at students.each do student, and make that end. And then here is what I want to display. And so it's going to be like student.name. This will make like an H3. And then it'll be like student.name. So I want that in the dynamic Ruby. Then I'm going to put a colon. I'm going to hard code the colon, because I know that that's going to be on my page based on how I set up the spec, right? It's like, all right, it's the name, then it's the colon, and then it's the num professors method. So here I would do student. Oh, I need to be back in dynamic Ruby now. Student.prof num professors. Cool. And that's like all, like for these challenges, that's all I need, right? I just want to check what's on the page. I'm not worried much about the styling or anything. I just want to like see if this works. And now, let's see what we're doing on time. Okay, cool. We got 8 minutes. We got plenty of time. So now if I run this, now I get like a better error where it's like some stuff is like showing up on the page here, right? So things are showing up, but my method is not actually returning any, like it's not returning an integer, it's returning a nil at this point. So it's not returning anything. So it's not that helpful. So now it's probably time to like go figure out what this method is gonna do. Student, cool. So this is like a pretty nice, like because I have this helper, I can do this method pretty easily. Like, and let's just pry in, because that's the easiest way to show it. So if I pry in here, it's like, this is where I want to like do my work, because I want to like check it at each point. So professors, cool. That returns me what kind of class is this? I think it's either an array or an active record relation. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a active record association collection proxy, but it works a lot like an array, because I can just call a .count on it, right? And then I'm like, I'm done. That's it. Is that not the route that you went?
Even what I did is I didn't make a class method. What I did in the HTML was do, I think it was student.professors.length.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you did it here, and you did .professors.length.
Yeah. So I was confused if that was the correct way of doing it. I wasn't too sure if I needed to do a model, or stay with what I had.
This isn't necessarily wrong. So I don't want to say that it's wrong, because it's not. It works, and like it's valid. The thing about doing, like, once you get to like 2, maybe 3 method calls in a view, you can think like, all right, I'm doing this for this view, but like if I do it over here in num professors, then I have access to this num professors method everywhere that I need it, right? And so that's the biggest thing. So now I don't have to repeat any code like professors.length anywhere else. Anytime I want professors.length to be a thing, then I call num professors, and that's like, it's not like the best naming, but now it's like it's a method defined one place and like accessible anywhere I have a student object, right?
So it makes it more dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. It's more dry, right? You're not repeating yourself ever in a view. And this isn't like much data modeling here, but it's a little bit of data modeling. It's a little bit of like count all my professors, you know what I mean? So it's like a little bit. So, and when I think like, oh, I'm like, you know, doing something to the data where I'm like collecting some number, like whether it's like a maximum amount or an average or a length of like how many, it's like that's probably best put on my model. And that's like, I totally don't really expect y'all to reach for that like right away, but it's something that we want to push you towards.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. So that I'm going to just get this here, put it here, and then I'm going to change this back to num professors. Cool, that looks like it should work. Let's see. Cool, and it does. And so then retroactively, what I would want to do here is I've got this method now that's tested at the feature level. It's not tested at the model level. So now I'd probably want to go to my student spec and add another describe block here called instance methods, because that's what this is. And then because I'm not going to use a shoulda matcher here, I'm going to use an actual it block. It can count its professors. Do end this. And then what I want to do now is probably like get my data from the index spec. And I could grab all of this data, put it all in this it block, and then I could just test, I could test this like for each one, right? I can do like an expect, what is this, Harry dot num professors dot 2 equal, how many does Harry have? I think 2, right? Or no, he had 3.
3.
He had 3. So then I would just copy and paste this and do it for each of them, like Malfoy and Longbottom, and I just have to go see how many are associated with how many. So Harry's got 3. Longbottom looks like has 1 based on this, and then Malfoy has 2. So I'll just do that. And then now I can run my student spec or my student model spec. And hopefully, like, now I've basically tested this over in isolation, right? That like, hey, this method works. This, you could kind of call this overkill for testing, but like, yep, it's counting the right number of professors each time. It's tested on a unit test level, on the model level, and it's tested on an integration level where it's being tested in the view, in a feature.
Yeah.
You got any other questions, stuff coming up?
No, it was just that what I did, and now I know like it's way better when it's more dynamic than what I had it before.
Cool.
That was my only concern. But yeah, thank you.
For sure. Was this format like helpful to see me run through it?
Yeah, very helpful.
Okay. Good. All right, that's it. We're done. I kind of love that this was like one-on-one, one-on-two situation, because it's just I think y'all can get more out of it that way.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Tim.
For sure. I'll see you later, Kevin.
All right.